Welcome to another episode of the Financially Free Physicians Podcast. I am your host, Sim Terwilliger, and I have a super special guest today, Maggie Reyes, and we are going to be talking all things money and relationships. Maggie, welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. So I am a double certified master coach, specialist in sex, love, and relationships. For the unfancy stuff, I'm a relationship nerd. I think about relationships all the time. I think about them from every angles. And I love this conversation we're about to have about how you feel about money, how you manage your money, how you think about your money, and how your money affects your relationships. It's going to be so juicy.
You guys, Maggie is the real deal. I remember we met at a conference a few months ago and I started following her on Instagram. She really knows her stuff. And let me tell you actually a little bit about the specific event, Maggie. I don't know if you remember where we met at, but it actually stood out to me. There was an event where it was women in medicine and they were shoe shopping, but specifically it was shoes that were like custom made for your foot. It's a very, personalized experience, very expensive, right? Some of these shoes were like 4 figures. And I thought it was so cool to see a group of women who work so hard for their money go out and enjoy it, because I think a lot of typical advice that you might hear, at least in the financial world, is save, right? Increase your savings rate, save more for retirement, and you don't get to enjoy it today. And so the landscape that we're kind of looking at is, a growing trend. As of 2019, the statistics in medical school changed. So now more women are enrolling in medical school. Specifically, it was 54.6% for last year. So women are going to outpace men as far as, medical school. Their salaries, right? A lot of women in medicine are the breadwinner. That's just the dynamic that we're seeing now, and that trend is growing. We want to talk a little bit about the shifts that we're going to see both in home and in the workplace. Maggie, what have you seen with your clients when you have kind of this income dynamic?
Well, I think that before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about it. And one of the things I see a lot is the pressure that you feel when you're the primary breadwinner, or when more of just keeping everything running falls on you, plus the pressure you feel as a woman in a patriarchal society where you're also expected to do all the work outside of your home and very intense work when you're a physician. And then most of the work inside your home is still the case for so many people. So the pressure that people feel, one of the things that I would love for anyone listening to realize is we swim in an ocean that tells us it should be this particular way, or this is how it was before. But we're in a moment in history where the statistic you just shared, like more women are enrolling in medical school, there will be more women doctors. We are living in unprecedented times. So whatever we thought it was supposed to look like, or it had to be like, this is the moment to just question it and to say, what works for me? What do I like? What do I want? What shoes do I want to wear? I guess I have permission to wear whatever shoes I freaking want. And I think that's so important, is the idea that's like you have permission to make it up in a way that works for you because it's all made up.
And I think that's such a good point too, because kind of what we're focusing on today, everything's a relationship, right? We're talking about relationships, not just with your spouse, your relationship with money too. Maybe being taught that I shouldn't, right? There's always that should. I shouldn't spend this on myself, or I should do this with my money. I was trying to find a statistic. I couldn't find it. I even asked ChatGPT to search Google for me, but I couldn't find a statistic on exactly how many women in medicine are out earning their husbands. I did find one for women in general. It was about 38%. So I'm sure that number is even higher.
Within medicine,
Exactly. So we know that trend is going to grow.
Yeah.
So we're seeing this trend kind of, you mentioned the patriarchal society. And so this is really going to challenge traditional gender roles, one being like the male is the provider. Can you talk a little bit about that, Maggie?
Yeah. So, I mean, gender roles have been evolving, right? For the last, ever since we developed them, they've been evolving. And so I think the biggest thing that I come up against with my own clients and in my own life and with my friends is we don't have a map for what to do. And especially if you're a doctor and you practice evidence-based medicine, you always go with the map. Oh, what the research says, what the evidence tells us, right? This is what you do all day, every day at work. And then at home, you're like, there is no map. There is no what the evidence says, because there is no evidence, because we're in this like new frontier. So I think that's probably one of the biggest themes for me for today, is to say, it's going to feel really weird, awkward, and stressful that there is no map, because you're used to being in situations where you don't follow the map. Someone could be in danger. if you don't follow the protocol or whatever the thing that you do in your specialty in medicine, if you don't follow that, it's like, why would we not follow that? Like someone could be hurt. But at home, it's a completely different, like deprogramming or unlearning. This thing that works so well when you're practicing medicine at home will keep you stuck and will keep you unhappy. So regardless of the statistic, regardless of all that stuff, it's just the idea of divesting ourselves of how it should be or how we thought it was going to be. And also we have all these ideas. We see whatever the Disney movies when we're growing up, and the rom-coms. I love a good rom-com, but that's not what we end up marrying, right? That's not, we make choices in our life that make sense for us in the seasons and chapters that we're in. And then it's like we try to apply cultural narratives, media narratives, how it should be to the person in front of us. And that just doesn't work. So it's like, that's why we're here talking to say, hey, if it's not working, what are you craving? What do you want? How do you want it to be? I love the freedom aspect of financial freedom. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. Financial freedom means 27 different things to 27 different people. So same with your marriage. Like if financial freedom means something different for 27 different people, a marriage that thrives, a relationship that's amazing is going to look really different across each person. So I'd love to just hear your thoughts, if that's okay.
Yes,
On
absolutely. So we get that a lot, especially, working with physicians, because there's like this big financial blogosphere, and we talk about the FIRE movement, right? Financial independence, retire early. And I think part of that stems just from the burnout that exists in the career. So a lot of physicians are thinking about a way out or just to do something different, they can cut back. So when I'm going over goals with a client and they say financial independence, I don't know what that means. We're going to probably spend half an hour talking about what that means. For some people, it can mean I like medicine. I just don't want to do it this many hours a week. I don't want to be in academics just to go for PSLF. It can mean I want to travel a lot. I want to be able to take a 3-month sabbatical and just go with my family. That's one of my dreams. I
Yeah.
would love to travel the world someday. But that's one example of financial independence. It can just mean I want to work, and then when I hit age 60, I'm done, and I want to have a really comfortable retirement. We might call that Fat Fire. There's so many like brands of fire. We have like Fat Fire, Barista Fire, but you get the gist, right? It
Yeah.
means so many different things. And I think that we're just ingrained to say we want financial independence, we want a good marriage without understanding what does that mean? What is the work
Yes.
that is involved? And so I guess relating it to the relationship part with the marriage. So Maggie, how do you, because the way you do coaching is a little
Yeah.
different. So I'd love for you to kind of explain that to the audience.
Oh,
How do you
totally.
help
Yeah.
women navigate this, right? And I'll give you some things that I've come across
Sure.
working with women. There's some situations where the male lower earning spouse may feel emasculated. And even if they
Mhm.
don't admit it, you can like kind of sense the tension in the room, the way people talk about money together. You can tell that there's that dynamic. You also have, women who feel pressured to do everything. I have to take care of my parents, okay, right? Sandwich generation. I have to take care of my parents,
Mhm.
my kids, all these things, extracurriculars. And then there's the guilt that some women have. They worked really hard to get into medical school, get in their specialties, and then they don't want to spend it on themselves because they feel like they shouldn't. And I see that a lot. How do you work with women to kind of push through that?
Okay, so we'll take them one by one. And first, I'll just start in general, just how I work with people. So I do something a little bit unique. I'm an individual marriage coach. So usually when you think about marriage help or support, you think about couples counseling or couples therapy or something like that. And a lot of people are in relationships where their partner, for whatever reasons, isn't interested in going to counseling or doesn't think they need it or doesn't want it or has had a bad experience. But yet my clients are like, I want a better relationship. I'm not going to wait. Like waiting has never worked for me. So I'm going to do something about it. So I just work based on systems theory from psychology. So systems theory is very simple. It's when one element of a system changes, the other elements in the system respond to that change. So if I come home and I'm grumpy and stressful and upset, guess what? I'm bringing this little black cloud with me. And then what's going to happen? People are going to react to my grumpy upsetness, right? And we might not have the most delightful conversations. But if I come home and I'm like, how is everybody? Welcome to the evening. I'm so happy everyone's here. That's going to just affect how everyone is responding to me in the sense of coming with me to the session, but how I'm interacting with them shifts and then how they respond shifts. So that's like the basics of the individual marriage coaching part. Let's take these one at a time. Where when you're in a relationship where the person feels, when it's a man and he feels quote unquote emasculated, the first thing that I want to say is women have felt trapped by earning less money since we started with the nuclear family, right? Since we left having tribes and making money. So this is a feeling that is so fascinating to me that we think it's a big problem if a man has it. But if a woman has it, it has been accepted by society. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying it's been accepted by society. It's like, oh, that's fine. They just have to deal with that, right? Like, just to give you that juxtaposition. So what we want to do is, I would say first, I worked in a law firm for almost 10 years. And whenever you see any legal contract, the first part of the contract is a definition. And the reason is we want to define what this means in our context here today. So we'll say this thing, and for our context, it means this. And whenever you see this term, this is what it means in this contract. I would find out if you're listening to us and you feel like if you're married to a man and he feels this way, what is he actually feeling? Is he feeling trapped? Is he feeling like he can't make decisions about money? Is he feeling frustrated? We want to drill down to what his experience actually is, because then we can, I would use the term solve for it. It might not be solving in the sense that the problem goes away, but you manage it differently. Is he longing to do more? Is he feeling just uncomfortable with the cultural narrative that it's okay for him to have a wife that makes a ton of money and it's safe for him to accept that? So we want to find out. For some people, it's anger, and it's not about feeling safe to accept it. It's about they don't want to accept it. So we want to check a little bit more deeply, like the flavor of what they're feeling, so then we can decide what we want to do about it, because it's very different if you're married to a man who's wildly proud of you, who can't believe his lucky stars that you took a second look at him, and is just having trouble in this sort of evolutionary state of how genders relate to each other. That's a very different scenario than if you're married to a man who doesn't think you deserve to make the money you make. So the coaching, the guidance, the what you would do about it, the how you would handle it would be completely different, even though the thing you're presenting with is the same. So what does that make sense to you, Sim? Like, ask me anything about that just on behalf of everyone who's listening.
So, the part of the challenge then is figuring out the why. Why do
Yeah.
you feel that way? And it could very well just be, from the man's perspective, it's a product of his socialization. Like you said, maybe he bought into a cultural narrative of what he should do. And I would be willing to wager for a lot of folks, that's probably what it is, but you can't assume. So your work would be involved then in working with, the woman, the wife, the female partner, in having this conversation to drill down to the why.
So one of the things is to drill down to the why, and the other thing is to decide what she wants. Like, is this a problem for her? How is it presenting as a problem? What is the issue that's happening? Are they arguing every time that they spend money? Does it just come up once a year when they're going to spend money on a vacation? Like, what is the nature and flavor of the problem? Because that will also guide us in like how much time and energy we devote to it and what else we might do. And also, any of the three things you mentioned, they're difficult conversations. So one of the things we work on a lot in coaching is, how do you prepare for a difficult conversation? What do you do? What do you need to think about? Especially with the person we love the most, it's like, it's also the person who can trigger us the most. So how do we prepare to be triggered if they say something that feels wacky to us when we hear it? And by wacky, I mean offensive or hurtful or disappointing or something like that. And I've coached many doctors in my coaching career. And I remember talking to one doctor who was an ER doctor. And she felt so overwhelmed by having some of these conversations with her husband, and we were coaching to that. And I was like, but you work in the ER. You have difficult conversations every day. Right? You know how to give bad news. You know how to do it with compassion. You know how to handle somebody when they're freaking out. Like, my coaching to her was, you know exactly how to handle this. We just need to take all of those skills that you use every day and apply them at home. And it was such a like revelation to her. So I just want to share that with everybody, because when you're stressed about having difficult conversations with people, I just want to remind you, most of you know exactly how to do that. You just get in your own way because you have an emotional attachment to that person.
And I guess that makes all the difference than being able to have that conversation without getting flooded.
So flooded is a great term just to explain it to everybody. It's from the Gottman Institute that Sim and I both love. And here's how I like to explain it. Imagine you're driving along and somebody cuts ahead of you in traffic and you like see red in that moment and you're like, what are they doing? There's a flood of chemicals that cascades through your body when that happens. And that's what happens when we're talking to someone and we feel like our feelings are hurt or we're disappointed or sad or mad or whatever. We have a cascade of chemical reactions happening in our body. And when we're flooded with those chemicals, it is the worst time to make decisions. Like our cognitive ability is literally impaired. We are less resourceful when we are feeling flooded than when we are like grounded and calm and able to sort of troubleshoot something. So just for everyone listening, that's why we prepare so much. It's like, how could you receive an answer that could be disappointing and not be flooded? What meaning are you attaching to it? How could we attach a different meaning to it? Like the example that I just gave of like, what if the guy is just scared? It's very different when he's like, oh, he's scared. I can have compassion for somebody who's scared, as opposed to feeling disappointed because he's not immediately on board with, I don't know, the $4,000 shoes or something.
He doesn't have instant enthusiasm
About it, right? It's like, oh, but if he's scared, I could relate to that in a different way. So we spent some time on that. The pressure to do everything is just real. That's the ocean that we swim in with regards to not just women physicians, but just in so many livelihoods in our culture, in our modern sort of urbanized culture.
You guys, Maggie's going to coach me live.
I'm going to coach you that.
No,
Tell me
I
what's
feel
happening.
it. As a woman, and not just me. I know this is like a very common experience, but like trying to do it all. Like a lot of my listeners know, I'm a financial planner. I'm a compliance officer. I also have twin boys. I have friends.
Yeah.
I'd like to think I have a life. Want to do everything. Want to do it well. We're out there. We're doing it, and it's tough. And I don't see, I have really great male colleagues, but I don't see that they have the same pressure. I'm just like, wow, like they're so calm, and they just,
Yeah.
they have
Yeah.
boundaries.
So we're socialized as women to put everyone else ahead of us. Men are not in largely, right? Some of these things are like, not everybody, not all the time, but largely the message they get is to put themselves first. And it's like, well, what would happen if I'm not saying put yourself first, because I don't think that's the answer either. But what would happen, and this is something I teach a communication framework called soul-centered communication. And one of the elements is to love and honor yourself equally as the other person that you're talking to. So we're used to putting, I don't know, our family, the kids, parents, the volunteer projects, everything else comes before us and our needs or our desires. And then we judge our needs and our desires. Like, oh, I love a pretty shoe. Oh, let me feel guilty about loving something pretty. Like, what would happen if you were allowed to like what you like, for one, and then to prioritize something that wasn't a need, that was just a desire? Like, what would your life be like? So this is the coaching, is as you go about your week, when you have conversations with people, when they ask you for things, if you are prioritizing yourself equally to them, so not more than and not less than, just equally to them, does this work for me? Do I have the energy? Do I have the capacity to do this? Do I want to do this? Do I want to say no to something else to be able to say yes to this? It's like having a different framework. I call them like decision filters, like having a different filter to making the decision, instead of I have to be available for everyone and I'm responsible for everyone. It's like, if my decision filter was, the better I feel, the better it is for everyone. It's still in service to everyone. Interestingly, it's highly of service to your kids for you to not be burnt out.
So taking an hour to go get a massage, you can frame it as, this will enable me to do the good work that I've been doing.
Yeah. Here's the paradox. Here's the nuance. And I coach so many women physicians. I know you can come with me to like duality and nuance. So we're going to go there. The paradox or the duality is we want to divest ourselves from the cult of productivity. So I'm still tying it to productivity because I know it's sexy for a lot of you listening to me. So if I tell you it's going to be better for your kids if you feel relaxed, so you get the massage so you don't yell at them, go get the massage. It's actually better for your kids. I'm still tying it to productivity and to like something that you want, because I know it's going to help inspire you to do it. But what if you got the massage, no matter how it affected your kids, even if it was good, bad, better, or worse, just because you wanted the freaking massage? I want a massage. I'm just going to go get one. They don't consider the effects on 57 different people before they go do that, for the most part, largely, right?
But Maggie, now what you're doing is you're challenging the whole notion of capitalism, which is that our value is rooted in our productivity. Like we always have to be doing something that's useful. We can't just do it because we want to.
I think it's such a duality and a paradox, because on the one hand, the more we do stuff that we love, we're still contributing to a capitalistic society. If I go pay for the massage, I'm still helping that person have a job. We swim, and we're not going to like leave it. but we're going to manage our relationship to it differently.
That's such a great point. So that's the moral of the story today, ladies. Go get that massage if you want to, whatever it is, buy the shoe.
Yeah. Which was the last thing, which was the guilt of making all this money and then like hesitating to spend it. And it's like, of course, we want to make responsible decisions. That's why you work with Sim and her team to make responsible decisions that make sense for your long-term goals. But there's also this idea, I don't remember where it's from. I learned this when I did an advanced certification in feminist coaching. They quoted this, that if you, there's some study, so someone who's intrepid, look it up. There's a study that says financial reporting for men is about investing, making more money, business opportunities, and multiplying money. Like they did its whole analysis of like financial magazines, articles, and newspapers, like in the media. And financial articles for women were about coupons, saving, cutting costs, stop going to Starbucks, like those kind of things. So those are the messages. We get this message, and it's like, yes, there actually was a study that assessed how things are presented to men and how to women. And it's like men multiply their money and women save their money.
And that's so sexist and so kind of contrary to what we see. I will tell you kind of in my line of work, in wanting people to make quote unquote responsible decisions. I do a lot of cash flow planning with the men as well. We do it with everybody, like to get the spouses on the same page. We do cash flow planning, and I call it cash flow planning because I think budgeting is the new B word. I hate it. It's so like rigid, and it's like, this is what you can spend on Chipotle this month, and you've overspent and now you failed at life. Cash flow planning, I always like to look at, okay, like what is your savings rate, but also, do you have anything self-care related in there? Can we have a line item in there that's for you? You don't need to check with your spouse. And I think that can, at least in one way, help mitigate some of those arguments. Why did you spend this much on that thing? Why did you buy that thing? You don't need to always be checking with each other. Give yourself that space, even within your plan. Because I will tell you, if you do not spend money on yourself, you will burn out. And then you will either just not want to do what you're doing, or you'll overspend. We'll just go on like a, F it, I'm going to go on a shopping spree, and you don't want that. I'll give an example too, Maggie. In my world, we have a lot of physicians who go for a PSLF, which is public service loan forgiveness, right? Nonprofit, you work for a nonprofit, 10 years, loans are forgiven tax-free. It's great. But it often ends up it means you're working in maybe a rigid like academic institution or in a high stress situation, right? And burnout is really high there. I had one physician I was working with who had less than a year to go. They were so close to the finish line to get 6 figures of student loan debt forgiven, and they just couldn't do it anymore. They were so burned out. They're like, I'm going into private practice. I'm done. So they walked away. I think they had like 10 months left. And so I just wonder, if I had met with this person like a few years ago, would the narrative have been different? Could we have found a way to maybe manage some of that, or even get a new job? You don't have to be at the same job to get PSLF. You can find another nonprofit, but could there have been another out before the burnout got so high?
I love bringing attention to this and us talking about it and normalizing that if you're feeling overwhelmed and burned out, you're not alone. I think it's so important. We always think we're going through it alone. And I'm 51 and I'm going through perimenopause, and I thought I was all by myself. And then I started talking to my friends who like I went to high school with, and they're like, oh no, I have all the same things you just said. I have them all. So it's like, if you're a physician, you're going through burnout, please know that you're not alone. And there's so many resources, including even your financial planner, can help you think about how to help you in a responsible way make different decisions that would help alleviate some of that responsibility or the work hours or whatever it is that's going on.
Yeah, because I feel like another issue that probably everyone deals with because of social media, but I think especially, women, the way that we're targeted, is comparing ourselves because of social media and looking at what other people are doing, like other people who have it all, or like, again, those financial blogs. The loudest voices are going to be the people who have realized success. You're not going to see the person who's like, I bought a car that I shouldn't have bought, the mistakes they made. You just hear the good stories. You just see the photos of people standing in front of their house. That you don't know what's going on with their marriage. And so
100%.
tell us more about that, Maggie, how you see that with your clients.
I would just remind everybody that whatever you see in social media is people's highlight reels. Like, it's a highlight reel. There's 8 hours, in your workday, or 24 hours in your day, and you're not seeing them schlepping to the office or waking up looking a mess or all the different things that we all go through. Like, we have to remember that it's a highlight reel. And I coach so many successful people that if you just looked at their social media, you'd think, oh my God, they live the best life ever. And then you just dig one layer deeper and there's a million things going on, just like for you. So I think that's the most important thing to remember. And if social media is inspiring and useful to you, great. But if you find yourself feeling sad or depressed or lonely or isolated after spending time on social media, I highly, highly recommend unfollowing accounts. If you don't feel good when you read something, unfollow that account. If you're spending time where you're like the time you're spending on it overall doesn't feel good, delete it from your phone, make it harder to access, put it on your computer. Like, take a little break, have a day that you don't look at all, check in how you feel. I love social media and I'm on it probably more than I should, quote unquote, be. But I constantly am checking in with like, how am I feeling? And does it feel inspiring to see what I'm seeing, or does it feel deflating? And it's like, you can read a book, you can call a friend, you can text somebody. We want to, just like you want to have a variety of foods you eat, you want to have a variety of inputs in your life. And one input alone isn't like a nutritious meal. So it's like, yeah, go crazy on Instagram. It's fine. It's also, but have you spoken over the phone or on Zoom or in person to a friend this week? So if you're listening to us now and you haven't, that's your coaching homework, is talk to a human in addition to, it doesn't mean you have to take it away, just in addition to whatever you're doing.
So Maggie, let's kind of circle back to something we started talking about, which was financial independence, and how that doesn't really have a definition, but we hear that phrase a lot. One thing that I would maybe put forward is that this idea of financial independence for women can be a way to achieve equality with men. So you were talking about these studies where they were talking about growing wealth and it was geared towards men. And now women have access to that as well. You don't need to do financial planning with your spouse. I, in general, think it's a good idea just to get everyone on the same page. But there's lots of situations where someone comes to me and they're like, you know what, like, let's just plan for me and my income, and we'll kind of leave spouse out of it. So I guess in a way we can kind of maybe model it the way that you do, Maggie. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
I mean, I think it's so critically important for women to feel that they can make their own choices at any time for any reason, including staying in a marriage, being in a marriage, changing what they're doing, changing jobs. And so, how do we have access to more choices? Is by having access to more money. That's the society that we currently live in. We don't live in a barter system, we live in a money system. So, I think absolutely understanding your money, how it can work for you, getting what I would say is like just basic financial literacy. Like, I grew up with what I would consider like a single mom, financially illiterate, in like not knowing how to manage or grow money. Mind you, in the society where they just tell us to cut coupons, right? Like, to the surprise of no one, many of us don't have basic financial literacy. So then I married the son of an accountant and a bookkeeper and an investment banker. And I was like, oh, there's things I need to learn here about how money works. So I love for everyone listening to this podcast, it's like, listening to this podcast is a great idea. Keep listening. Talking to Sim is a great idea, because regardless of the decisions you end up making, it's like we have to know the alphabet before we can write the paragraphs. And I think that's one of the ways we get to financial freedom, is like, wait, what is the alphabet of money?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. That is so funny, by the way, that you married like the
Yeah,
exact like opposite
yeah,
of you, and
yeah,
that you're also a marriage coach. So I'm glad that
yeah,
that worked out. I
yeah,
think this is also the power of working with women, because we're not going to like talk down to you. We're going to
yeah,
educate. We're going to empower you to make your own decisions, and we're going to focus on growing wealth too. It's not just for
yeah,
men.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love it.
And then I do want to make kind of an honorable mention here. I think the best time for someone to get started with financial planning, there's this saying, like, the best time was yesterday and the next best
Yeah,
time is today.
yeah,
For those of you who are in relationships and you're thinking about getting married, I think the best time is before you get married, to sit
mhm,
down, kind of know what's the lay of the land. What do you have? What do you owe for both people, in
mhm,
a non-judgmental environment? It can be very embarrassing for some people. There's a lot
mhm,
of sense of shame in talking about finances. I have one client, I wonder if they're listening. I have one
mhm.
client who every time we meet, he and his wife say, Sim, you get to see us financially naked. And it's
Okay.
true. You get to see kind of like the
Yeah.
behind the scenes, but I think it's a great time to do it before you get married. And a really hard conversation, speaking of hard conversations, in a lot of cases, especially when you have, like
Mhm,
a female doctor, you may
mhm.
need to get a prenup. In fact,
Yeah.
you probably should get a prenup, and that's not a bad thing. And it doesn't mean that you think your marriage is going to fail, but someone gets to make decisions. What
Mhm,
happens if the relationship dissolves? It's going to be the state, or it can be
mhm.
you and your honey.
I remember seeing something on Instagram to talk about social media and the ways that it can be good, and hearing that statement, it had never crossed my mind in that way, that you're going to have a prenup no matter what. It's either written by the government which is largely run by men in a patriarchal society. So think about how that's going to go for you. Or it's going to be written by two people who love each other in conjunction with their advocate, which would be their attorney. So it's a completely different emotional experience to think about it as, what if we surround the decisions we want to make around money with loving care versus whatever the government came up with, the lowest common denominator, the cheapest, they get the 3 bids, they get the cheapest one, like that kind of vibe around how those decisions are made.
So I really think it's great to think about like best case scenario, plan for that dream, and we'll talk about that in planning. Like, what is your big dream? Whether it's financial independence or something else. Also good to look at worst case scenario. And those are the unpleasant ones. But that's why you do things like get a prenup, you do your estate planning, you buy disability insurance. Those are the boring, horrible things we don't like to do, but it's like, let's just rip off the Band-Aid and do it. And then you can land somewhere in the middle and we can kind of work off of that. So Maggie, I do have kind of a big question for you. I feel like this is kind of a funny one to end on, or not funny, but with, the divorce rate being so high, I think it's around 50%. How do you help the women that you work with navigate that decision if they should consciously decouple, or if it's worth salvaging?
I think I haven't read the latest research, but the last time I looked, the divorce rate is going down, but people are getting married less, which is a whole other dynamic of like, my personal philosophy is, if you're going to be married because it works for you. And if it doesn't work for you, which means you're suffering, you feel like there's emotional abuse, you feel like you don't feel, your home doesn't feel like your sanctuary, then we do need to continue to unshame divorce. I think for so many years, divorce was like such a bad word, or like a unaccepted in our society. And I think it's just important to say, listen, women physicians will understand this even better than when I explain this to other people. In our culture, we have extended our lifetime orders of magnitude. So when the institution of marriage, quote unquote, was created or developed, or we started having formally recognized marital unions, we would get married at like 15 and die at 30 back in the day. Now we live to 80, 90, some people to 100. So we have exponentially grown our lifespan, but never rethought what a marriage should be or how a marriage should work. So you can have 20 amazing years with someone. It doesn't take anything away from those 20 amazing years. And year 21, you could just decide, this no longer works for me, I want something else. And there's so much shame in that. And my question is always, why is there shame in that? Why do we presuppose that we should only have one structure? And I'm telling you, as someone who, like, I have a crush on my own husband, I would love to die, next to him whenever that happens. My personal situation is, it works for me. I love it. It's fine. Now, that doesn't mean it has to work the same way for everybody. I also got married much older. I was in my 30s. I sort of had like, this is what I want out of life really clear. And a lot of us don't. We get married when we're much younger, when we want what out of life isn't clear. Maybe you weren't a doctor then and you're a doctor now, and now you have different passions and interests, and you have evolved in ways that you didn't expect to evolve. So my biggest message is just unshaming that process. And second to that is, it's so different. Your emotional experience of your life is so different if you make a big decision like that from anger versus if you say, I'm going to do my best to make this relationship work. I'm going to determine it's really not for me. And I'm going to make this decision from that grounded, centered place versus from that ragey, flooded place. You can end up making the same decision, but how you experience it is completely different. And that is sometimes something that I do work on with people in coaching, is to come to this place where it's like, oh, I can respect this person. This person is just not for me.
I think that's a really important point, really, for any kind of big decision, right? Is to not make it from a heightened emotional state and make sure that you've kind of thought it through. I think it's always a great idea to, talk to a third party, get kind of a neutral opinion, someone who can help you think through your thought process a little bit better.
What I always say, this is like the little hashtag, is no big decisions from big emotions.
Oh, I love that.
It's
Guys, I
easy to
think
remember.
no big decisions from big emotions. Well, I think that is such a perfect place to end. So what I'll say is, if you guys need some, and you ladies really, if you ladies need some help with your relationships and kind of uncoupling your feelings about spending money on yourself and what to do with your spouse and how to help them through whatever experience they're going through, changing the system, as Maggie called it, we'll have her link in our description so you can reach out to her. If you need some help with your financial planning, if you want to sit down and get on an intentional cash flow plan together so you don't feel guilty and you're building a life that you enjoy, right? Coming back to, reach out to me or the team. We are here for you. And remember that your net worth is not your self worth. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered individualized financial advice. If a specific investment is mentioned, it should not be considered a recommendation or endorsement to buy or sell the investment. You are encouraged to seek the advice of a financial professional before implementing any investment strategies discussed. All investments involve risk. Past performance does not guarantee future results.